The second main type of FCC radio license is non-commercial educational, also known as public radio. These stations' primary mission is public service and to provide an alternative both in content and thinking to the commercial outlets. Non-commercial stations operate on the reserved FM band, 88.1 to 91.9 megahertz, which is reserved for non-commercial educational stations, including religious stations, on which advertising is prohibited. As mentioned earlier, public radio stations may also operate in the commercial FM band. Non-commercial stations are generally owned by a religious or educational institution, and the multiple ownership rule does not apply to non-commercial stations. Non-commercial educational stations operate with full and part-time paid employees like commercial stations, but rely on volunteer assistance for programming, fundraising, and promotional operations. Programming on public radio consists of a combination of formats like music and talk, the block format mentioned in the first session, to offer informational, educational, and entertaining programming normally not offered on commercial radio. Non-commercial stations offer an alternative to the mainstream. If their format is music, it usually is classical, jazz, free form, or a unique format like New Mexico Spanish music on KANW. Funding sources for non-commercial stations include listener contributions, government funding, and underwriting. Non-commercial radio is more commonly known as public radio because of these listener contributions. You hear it all the time, especially during membership drives. You put the public in public radio, or support for this program comes from listeners like you. Listener support comes in the form of direct participation during on-air membership drives, bequests or wills, in-kind donations of goods and services such as catering, event venues, station apparel, etc., attending fundraising events like concerts or theater, and vehicle donations. Many non-commercial stations also receive government funding, either federal and or state level, and public radio stations also generate revenue with underwriting, which we'll talk more about shortly. These revenue sources and income they generate goes back into the nonprofit operation and is used to pay for national program fees, station growth, upgrades, and repairs, rather than to make a profit as in commercial broadcasting. The main source of federal funding came from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was a private nonprofit corporation created by Congress in 1967 to subsidize public radio and television stations' ability to provide quality programming for growth and development. Some of the CPB grants KANW received were a program acquisition grant to help pay for the expensive NPR programs, a community service and rural service grant used to pay for services like news, legal, and engineering work, and a minority incentive grant, which increased our federal funding due to the minority makeup of our audience and minority majority of the APS Board of Education, our licensee. KANW also received a couple of one-time grants to help improve our website and internet presence, and a digital conversion grant to upgrade our old analog transmission system to new digital technology. Unfortunately, federal funding was rescinded by Congress in July of 2025, leaving public broadcasting stations like KANW with significant budget deficits. Government funding may also come from the state in which the station operates. Many states provide direct funding to public broadcasters, allocated as a direct line item in the state budget or through other means. Although KANW doesn't receive regular funding from the New Mexico state budget, we have received various one-time grants for building our state-of-the-art broadcast van in 2005, for equipment upgrades and improvements for KEDP in Las Vegas in 2024, and for new digital broadcast consoles at our studios in 2025. Let's discuss underwriting in greater detail. Underwriting is a paid announcement that identifies and acknowledges a for-profit donor, but does not and cannot promote the goods and services of that donor. Underwriting announcements may not interrupt regular programming, meaning a station couldn't play one of these announcements in the middle of a song or a newscast. They have their own times to run built into their format clocks. If a nonprofit organization purchases underwriting, Those announcements have more latitude and can be promotional or almost commercial in nature. So, what is allowed in an underwriting announcement? The first would be slogans that identify but do not promote. The inherent goal of a slogan is to promote, but if you find one that is more informational than promotional, it would be allowed in an underwriting announcement. Because of this gray area, many stations are conservative and don't include slogans, period. An underwriter's location information is allowed in the announcement in the form of its address, phone number, website, or historical information, like serving Albuquerque since 1950. Value neutral descriptions of a product or service are also allowed, meaning the language cannot contain comparative or qualitative descriptions of the donor's products or services. In other words, the underwriter can't compare their goods and services to a competitor's as being superior. And finally, brand names, trade names, and product service listings known in particular professions are allowed in underwriting, like the Ford Mustang, Apple iPhone, or Tide laundry detergent. That is what is permitted in an underwriting announcement. Now let's cover what is not. The first is price information, which includes interest rates and any indication of savings or value associated with the product or service, including the word free. An underwriter couldn't mention ticket prices for a concert, low pricing for lunch specials, or 0% car financing for well qualified buyers. Call to action statements are not allowed in underwriting, like stop by, don't wait, call now, and the like. Any comparative or qualitative language like superlative adjectives is also forbidden. Statements like the best, number one, or the only are prohibited unless the language is factual information or historical in nature, like if the underwriter's business is the only source for those goods and services. For example, if Sandia National Labs purchased underwriting that mentioned they were the largest employer in Albuquerque, that statement would be allowed because they are in fact the largest employer in Albuquerque. And lastly, any inducement to buy, sell, or lease a product or service is not allowed. Think of any type of sale or special promotion like the first 6 months free or a free phone for the first 50 people in the door. Here is an example of a legal underwriting announcement using the same business as in our commercial example given earlier. This program is made possible in part by Loyola's Family Restaurant, offering homemade breakfast burritos and burgers like the Albuquerquean with fresh roasted green chili. Loyola's Family Restaurant is open for breakfast and lunch at 4500 Central Southeast in Nob Hill. For more information, 268-6478 or loyolasfamilyrestaurant.com. Here are the two ads side by side to see the difference between the language in the commercial and underwriting announcement. Note the promotional nature of the commercial and the straightforward informational tone of the underwriting. One of the other main differences you see when the ads are side by side is the length of the announcement. In general, a commercial is either 30 seconds or 60 seconds, regardless of whether the advertiser is for profit or nonprofit. The length of an underwriting announcement is usually 15 seconds for a for profit and 30 seconds for a nonprofit. This is a list of the major non commercial educational radio stations and their owners in Albuquerque.